Great. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining today, our webinar on water management in green and blue spaces and wildlife that support water management. So I'm Laura Collins, and I work for Go Parks London and London Friends of Green Spaces Network, both organisations that support friends groups in London. So this webinar was conceived by one of our working groups. These are groups of friends groups who meet sort of 3 or 4 times a year to think about issues that affect friends groups, and they find ways of providing support on these topics. So this could be through webinars like this one today, or through articles or case studies, or contacting other organizations for support. We currently have a few working groups operating. So these are on climate resilience, biodiversity, large commercial events in parks, planning, and encouraging responsible dog stewardship in parks. So I'd just say, if you would like to join one of our groups, or if you'd like any more information about our working groups, I will put my email in the chat shortly, or you can reply to the newsletter that have the details of this webinar, because it would always be great to have more friends groups involved. Right, on to the webinar. So our speakers today are Adrian Butler and Digby Wheeler. So Adrian is a professor at Imperial in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department, and is a principal investigator with Camellia, which is Community Water Management for a Livable London. So I'm sure Adrian will explain it better than I, but anyway, as their website explains, they bring together innovative science with communities and stakeholders in London to promote sustainable water management and a better environment as the city grows. So really great idea. So thank you. And Digby is an urban rewilding officer with Citizen Zoo, which is a social enterprise committed to rewilding and conservation. And Citizen Zoo has spoken with us before about their water vole program, and more recently they've been involved in bringing beavers to Paradise Fields in West London. I went on one of their guided tours, and it was really great. I highly recommend it, and also really good if you've got some kids who are interested in nature and wildlife. So without further ado, Adrian, over to you.
Thank you, Laura. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully that's the right window. So hopefully, can you see that first slide?
Yeah, looks good.
Lovely. Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for this invitation to talk to you. As Laura says, my name's Adrian Butler. I'm Professor of Subsurface Hydrology. I work in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Imperial College London. And the project I want to talk to you about, called Camellia, which is our sort of name for the sort of rather longer title, which is Community Water Management for a Livable London. It's for academic institutions, Imperial, along with UCL, University of Oxford, and the British Geological Survey. And its aim, we've been funded by the Government Research Council, the Natural Environment Research Council, to help apply our science to make impact on a regional basis, and our region is Greater London. So community engagement, what's your problem? And what are the problems you face? And do these align with what you're interested in? And can we find common ground? These are often big questions that people face when they're trying to engage in looking at some of these environmental issues. And I just really want to take you on the Camellia journey. We've been running for nearly 5 years now. Our objective was to enable water security for a more livable city using real participatory engagement with a systems approach based on environmental sciences. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but the vision really is then to work with London's community and stakeholders to provide effective water management decisions and hopefully have sustainable growth. We're funded from this program called the Regional Impact of Science in the Environment. We work with a lot of partners from all different areas, but within those there are community groups, as well as obviously water companies, borough councils, GLA consultants and so forth. If there's one word to describe what our project has been seeking to do, it's integration. And I think this is really important. And at the heart of it is we want to try and help water communities integrate into the water decision-making program to help integration with institutions and communities. But also we're dealing with an integrated system, and we need to understand that and understand how we can manage it better. And the other big problem, which perhaps people often think about, is scale. If you've got a wetland or a little swale, that's a very small thing. But of course, that will be sitting in a borough. And of course, in London, we have a large number of boroughs, and you actually find that boroughs have different policies, different practice. And so going from one borough to another can often cause tensions. Then you have water zones. You've got a drainage network for the sewers. That's one water zone. You've got a water supply zone. And then, of course, we've got the city itself, the Greater London area, and all that is sitting within the Thames catchment. So there's a whole range of different scales that we have to operate over. And of course, the system here, you've got a very simplified representation of the entire water cycle. It's including rivers, groundwaters, but of course it takes that water from rivers, put it into supply, treat it into distribution, it's used, it gets then turned into wastewater, you have to treat it. We might have too much because we have these combined systems, so we might have CSO overflow, and of course we've got surface runoff as well. So there are various pathways within that system where water is potentially leading to flooding or is causing issues concerning water quality. And there are areas where, in a sense, communities can help in reducing that. We can be more efficient in demand. We can increase our storage. We can reduce runoff. But of course, it has to be a collective way of doing that. What we've sort of sought to do then is to work with communities, and we think that there are some challenges here, which I hope I'm going to try and convince you that we've met in terms of engaging with communities and giving them a voice. Often groups can feel powerless. Data is really, really important, but it needs to be accessible, it needs to be visual, it needs to be understandable. A lot of our decisions that we make when we're looking at trying to address problems is using models, and they're very powerful tools, but they can be a bit of a black box. They can be very unfriendly to people who aren't experts. So can we make them more user-friendly? So really, there's a need for creative digital tools to achieve all this. And of course, these tools are really important because they are ways in which we can help our thinking about something, and it's ways in which we can communicate. So we find that with our modelling approach, we want to have less emphasis on scientific knowledge. And I hasten to add, that doesn't mean we are jettisoning it. It has to have sound science in there. But really, we want more emphasis on making them usable so that they're more attractive and more useful on a wider basis. So that's really what we've tried to achieve in Camellia. And just to give you an example, first of all, this has been one of the, in engineering, one of the big problems in terms of a traditional approach. There's a problem, you bring in some experts, they come up with a solution, they do something called stakeholder engagement, and that is basically how do we make the stakeholders accept the solution. Suggest that's not the way to do it. You have a problem, you have stakeholder engagement, and you work together to co-design a solution. And then, of course, the challenge is how to include stakeholders in that solution progress. Now, that's certainly what we want to achieve. And so what we've been trying to do is help that process. And one of the first things we started off with was a inner city estate. If you look in the lower picture, you can see the Shard in the background. So we're very much in central London. They had this garage roof, and they wanted to put a community garden on there. And but they needed funding, and they weren't sure how to obtain it. And we had an existing, one of our academic partners at UCL had links with this group. And so we went through a co-design process. So what we did was we had a series of workshops looking at, first of all, discussing values. Why did they want it? What were they trying to achieve? I also hasten to add that was really important because some of the biggest problems wasn't, in fact, getting a garden. It was issues like security and litter and lighting and so on and so forth. So again, it's really important that we listen to all these, and we can't necessarily solve them, but at least we can think about how those can be incorporated into a solution. Then they went through a sort of workshop of creating ideas. And it was at this point one of the interesting aspects, because colleagues from the British Geological Survey, part of their tech team, watched this. And for the third workshop, what they did is they produced this very simple digital calculator, which allowed people just to, in a sense, take the designs they'd done in paper and sketched out and just draw it on a laptop. You can see a group of them there working on it. And as they did it, as they put the different planting in and what have you, it did two things. It started to say how much water that planting would need. And so that starts to think about how much do you need to store and how you're going to do that. But the other additional benefit is it started to say, well, if we do this, this is actually going to slow up the flow of water. It's going to reduce runoff. And so what we then produced was, by listening to their stories, going through that co-design process, bringing in this thing they hadn't thought about, which is that this feature could reduce runoff, and then produce a calculator which could then quantify these things, but also provide an output which would be suitable for then submitting to for a funding application to the GLA or to Southwark Council. So as I say, we undertook that, and that actually I'll just go back. So that was extremely effective in the end for other reasons, because of structural problems. They didn't actually put the garden on the roof, but they did get the funding, and they did put their garden adjacent to the property. And so from that, we then worked with some community gardeners in South London, thinking about planting and watering and so forth. And out of that, we developed this garden water calculator. And so the idea here is that you can click on the link, you can go to your location, you can design your garden, and you can start to get an idea of how much runoff reduction your planting produces, and how much water you might need, for example, here for 12 days of a dry period. And so that makes you start thinking about, well, if I'm going to meet that demand, I need a water butt, what size of water butt, and so on and so forth. So again, it's to help people understand and think about how these features work, how they can help reduce runoff, reduce flooding, how they can store water, but also how, if you then change your design, change your planting, put permeable paving in, etc., how that can improve the performance of a garden. So as I say, so we worked on that, and then we also, in parallel with this, we were using social scientists, particularly based at Oxford University, and thinking about how we can map issues which are of concern to local communities. And they use some various techniques, these sort of snowballing method, when you sort of just ask people to recommend other people, and you keep snowballing until you sort of eventually feel you covered everyone, so you can sort of get all the stewardship groups involved, and interviewing these community members. And what was interesting that came out was that water quality was a very key issue for local communities. And so on the back of that, we then worked with Thames 21, an NGO which is very much very highly involved in looking at water management in various parts of London. We were working in North London, in the Enfield area, and there are some major issues on the Pims Brook and Salmons Brooks, where there are some issues of pollution and water quality. And so we were looking at how constructed wetlands could help address these in order to improve our understanding of the system. We did some very detailed modeling of this. But then what we did is we worked with the local community members, and jointly with Thames 21, to co-design a wetland explorer tool, which would allow the output from the model, which is sort of text files, not very helpful, into a form where you could explore, you could pull in different wetlands, you could see what the impact was, say, on nitrate levels and on flows. We could see what climate change might do and so forth. And so, as I say, this is another area where we're trying to make data and models more accessible to local communities. But of course, what about other data? So alongside that, we've produced a water data explorer, which allows you, and these are live, you can use these links, you can put together in a very visual way a whole range of different sources to explore water data, flood zones, the hydrogeology, groundwater source protection zones, a whole range of different components, but also it allows local groups to do citizen science and integrate their data into this. But what about water quality? Well, alongside we brought this water quality dashboard, and the idea here is this allows you to actually look at data, to scan through different years, different rivers, different reaches. It's got information on the different components, whether it's nutrients, whether it's metals, organics, and so forth. Again, with the objective to try and help people be better informed about some of the challenges that our rivers are facing. Now, of course, education is important. So we've also funded through the Royal Bank of Canada, believe it or not, we've been developed a GCSE level teaching resource, which helps students to understand the water cycle. Oh, hello. And as I say, so again, we saw, and that again uses a resources management tool to help them think about, well, what happens about population growth and climate change, and how do we meet the challenges of ensuring that we have a water supply. And of course, that brings us on to this whole idea of integrated water management. And so one of our major outcomes, and I don't expect you to take all of this in, but what we put together is a very flexible modular model of the water system. It allows us to construct, simulate very quickly, and then investigate. And we can look at, well, what happens if we start putting in changing garden practice or rainwater harvesting, or putting in changing land runoff, and so on and so forth. And how does this link in with what water companies are doing? So this whole model is a way of very much engaging with different stakeholders to look at problems, to look at challenges, but also to look at co-designing solutions. And it's very exciting for us because we are, in fact, on Monday of next week, we're going to be meeting with the various catchment hosts across the Thames catchment to explore with them how this sort of work can help them in their work. So really, going back to the question, communication engagement, this is our solution. It's we think we've got these new ways of engaging with communities to give them a voice. We have made data accessible and visualized it. We're bringing together these creative models and these digital tools, which I say you can use for thinking and communicating. And so those are our outputs, and those will all be integrated. We're just in the process of finalizing this water info hub, where there'll be lots of information, the access to these tools, access to data, and so forth, which will then be available for anyone to use. So with that, sorry, I've probably gone through that very quickly, but I wanted to try and keep to time and also give an opportunity for any questions that might be.
Yes, I think maybe we'll do questions for Adrian now before we go on to Digby's talk, because I think it's going to be very different, I suspect. And it's really interesting to hear about you know, making this data accessible, because, you know, I think when you look at the tables and all the different pieces that are involved, and, you know, the complicated graphs and stuff, I think absolutely making that accessible to community groups like ours is really important. I was gonna ask when how do people access these tools around water retention, but you said that this will all be on the hub. Is that all the things?
Yeah. So we're in the process of just finalizing that and getting it live. So say watch and we'll obviously let you know, and you can communicate that once when that's all available.
Yes, if you let me know, I will distribute that to all the friends groups. So right, does anyone have any questions for Adrian? Anna.
Hello, thank you for your really interesting talk, and those tools look really exciting to be able to explore. I'm from a friends group in a local nature reserve, and we're interested in deculverting a brook. And I was wondering, is this the kind of, is that scale possible to explore on your level? And one of the things that we've finding difficult is understanding how it fits in with the sewage system.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's really good question. So it's about rewilding to a certain extent and daylighting rivers.
Yeah, daylighting it. Yeah.
Yes, we've actually, I mean, we have done some work with that a colleague of mine at UCL. She's now at the University of Melbourne, and it's really important. So I think part of it is obviously, in many ways, the challenge is understanding, I mean, where the pollution is coming from, I guess, because obviously once you start to open it up, you know, then people have got access to it. And also the other big problem is they can see what's going on, and suddenly what they see is not particularly pleasant. So I mean, I think some of our data and tools certainly might be of use to you. You know, you can look at, say, the geology around there, which can be quite important. You can look at the water quality data associated with those, you know, that river system. So I think that, you know, there are things that would be of benefit. But yeah, we're all for, I think, you know, creating these more natural environments and opening up. But as I say, the trouble is I know it can be challenging because, of course, when you do open it up, it suddenly you see what's there, and it's not particularly nice.
That's what the challenge that we have at the moment in trying to understand where pollution is coming in, and if the sewage system is actually now connected into the culvert as well.
The sewage system here is horrendous because, well, sorry, when I say, you know, I mean, the big problem in London has often been the way in which, for example, people have had, say, extensions done, and they've had some plumbing. And the trouble is people are plumbing the wastewater system into the surface water system. And so you got these cross connections and misconnections. And one of the big problems is Thames Water half the time has no idea what's going on themselves. One piece of good, I mean, I have been working a lot with Thames Water, and one really exciting area is they are putting in about 1,500 real-time sensors into the sewage system around London. A lot of it actually, funnily enough, in the Brent catchment, because there's been a lot of problems up there. And the idea being is that they can see in real time when things suddenly happen, and because one of the other big problems is blockages and so forth. And so hopefully there will be a much better response to addressing some of these, you know, horrible pollution issues, which I've worked very close with a community group on the Wealdstone Brook, which is part of the River Brent, and they've had awful problems for years, to be honest. And it's just been one of these, it's just taken so long to get movement from consultants and from water companies and from the borough council. The trouble is, this is such an integrated problem. You know, it's to do with often wet wipes blowing down toilets and blocking things and causing overflows. It's to do with borough councils having, you know, suddenly Harrow to Brent and things change, you know, and then of course it's political changes as well as practice changes. And then obviously you've got the water company as well, all involved. So it's a really multi-stakeholder problem. And I think one of the things we're trying to do is to get ways of making that dialogue, you know, much more constructive.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, that was probably quite a long answer, but hopefully that was helpful.
No, it's very helpful. Very helpful. Thank you very much.
I'd be interested to hear how you get on with the project, Anna. So please do stay in touch and let us know how it goes. I mean, I expect it will take a while.
But where is that again?
We're in the Brent catchment.
Is it?
We're on the border of Harrow and Ealing. We're in Ealing, and we've got TfL on has got part of it, and we've got Thames Water, and we've got a gym, and we've got a lovely
Is that
gnarly.
Broomfield Park?
No, it's called Grove Farm.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not
It's-
familiar with that. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a
Um,
very small. It's just a small brook, but
Right.
yeah, it's a very gnarly multi-stakeholder problem.
Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you. And just one quick thing I'll plug, because I'm going to say there's lots and lots of things we've done. Which the other thing we've been doing a lot, and we're working with Thames 21 and the University of Middlesex is looking at road runoff pollution, because that's another big problem, particularly in London. So, and again, that's probably why you've got TfL.
Yeah, we have that problem too.
Yeah.
Right, any other questions for Adrian? Looks like Roger's got.
Can I ask?
Oh, let's do. So we do Roger, then Annie.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for an extremely interesting and informative talk there. It was absolutely fascinating. I'm just wondering about how much use has been made of the tools and the engagement processes so far. You illustrated a few in the talk, but how widely known is this, or is it something we need to try and push the agenda on, particularly once the new
yes. Well, we've been developing it. So we've been working with particular groups to develop this work. So we're getting to the point now where we want to get it out.
Yeah.
So this sort of opportunity is ideal for us. And as I say, once we've got out, you can access some of these tools now, and I can certainly make those links available. I can do it through you, probably, Laura.
Yeah, great.
And as I say, once we've got our info hub all up and running, that will be a way in which you'll have a sort of focused site to access it. But yes, so we're getting to the point now where we want to see people trying them out and making use of them. I say we've gone through sort of focus groups and so on and so forth. So we have sort of trialed these, and that's been very helpful in terms of the development process. But obviously, there's only a limited number of people you can tend to do that. But we are hoping that they will be, widely used. And
okay, well, that's really helpful, and certainly, we'll push it at the appropriate time. There's no point in pushing something before it's quite ready. But if we do things to whet people's appetite, say, and this is coming, I think that's a really sort of good way of dripping information in and getting people interested.
Yeah, no, very much so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Annie, and then Malcolm. So Annie first. Yep. There you go.
Yeah. Now, I'm wondering, with so many schemes that might be happening for using the water in water catchment, will there be sufficient going back down into the water table? That's one question. And the other is, are Thames Water already engaged with the large amount of pollution in the runoff from roads? Are they getting to grips with purifying it and returning it to the water table, or to wherever, to rivers?
Okay, wow, right, okay. Okay, so groundwater, that's a really interesting question. It's very complicated in London, to be honest, for a number of reasons, because of the geology is the main reason. So actually, a lot of London is underlain by London clay. And in fact, this is one of the big problems when you want to do things like, if you want to do what we call SUDs, sustainable drainage systems. So the idea is you collect the water and then it should infiltrate. Well, of course, if you're sitting on clay, it doesn't infiltrate. It would. So in other words, you have to design SUDs appropriately. The other interesting challenge is, in fact, is also because we're part of in London, we're part of the Thames system, and you've got a major load of gravels. And those obviously certainly in where I work in South Kensington, so where you do a lot of infiltration, it goes into the gravels, and then that obviously can affect. Well, let me tell you a quick story. I'm sorry, I don't want to take too much time, but just to show you the complexity of what you have in an urban environment. We did a project with London Underground a few years back. At Victoria Station, if you're ever on the District and Circle Line Victoria Station, there is a door which you can go behind, and I have done, there is a sump, and they're pumping 9,000 litres of, sorry, 9 million litres of water a day. The reason they're pumping that out, because if they didn't, all the tube wouldn't run, because the gravels, because on the between sort of Sloane Square and St James Park, that's all gravels, and so the tube network, if they didn't pump that water out, it would be flooded. Where's that water coming from? Well, it's coming from rainfall, but when we did the calculation, a lot of it is coming from leakage of Thames Water's main system. So you've then got the leakage from the main system going into the gravels. If you didn't pump it out, it would stop the tube from running. You pump it out and then you put it into the sewer, and it goes down to Beckton to be treated at the wastewater treatment works. That's some of the difficulties we have to, and that's why I'm saying integrated water management is so important, because of those complexities. I don't think that's probably, the trouble is your question is actually a very large one, but I hope that's sort of giving you an idea of some of the challenges, and we are trying to work, we're working with water companies to try and help. And we've done a lot of work with Thames Water. I sit with them, I'm part of their Mogden Wastewater, technical committee. I sit on the River Crane Smarter Water Catchment. So we're doing a lot of work trying to improve the water quality in London's rivers. But I have to be honest, it's an oil tanker. Turning it around is slow. I think the will is to try and do it. The resources needed is huge, and of course Thames is not in his best financial situation. I suppose most of you realise that. But the people I work with are very keen to try and achieve this, and so I'm just hoping that in time we will see some really good benefit, which will make some of these rivers a bit nicer to walk along and look at.
Have they already got some of the drainage from runoff of the roads going into cleansing systems?
Well, I think a lot of the drainage, I think that's where some of these constructed wetlands could be really helpful in terms of intercepting the road runoff, taking some of these pollutants out, the organics, the metals and so forth, putting, and then, using the wetlands as a treatment process before it's then released either back into the river or infiltrated into groundwater.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm conscious of time. We definitely need to move on to Digby very soon, but we've got 2 more questions. Malcolm, do you want to go now?
Yeah, just very quickly, I wanted to ask about funding, because we've got a scheme in our local park which has been under discussion for years, and we've got Environment Agency and water company and council involved, but it seems to have stalled mostly because of lack of funding. I mean, is there a good source of fund? I mean, where should funding come from for these sort of things, and what's the best way to go about it?
Well, that's sort of a tricky one, because I think, well, I obviously, not knowing your specific situation, there can be, if you can link it in with development and get some of the part of the council master plan and the CIL, the leverage, you can sometimes sort of get funding that way. Environment Agency is pretty well broke. It's I think often what you're trying to find is some sort of way of getting multiple benefits, and then it's a bit easier to justify the funding. So I think often if you can then sort of tap into a number of different pots, that can be quite effective.
Would water companies and the sewage company, would they usually be expected to contribute to it, was it?
Yes, they will, but often it can become a bit of a political football between the water companies and the borough councils and so forth. And then if you've got multiple councils, so we've had some of this problem in the Brent catchment. And I think one of the problems that we've found is actually engaging with councils and getting to know councillors and really getting them on board and getting their backing. That certainly can be quite useful. And we've started to develop ways. We've done webinars with people from Harrow Council and Brent Council and so forth, just to try and get them to see the problems, and therefore hopefully they will then back plans. But I'm not going to lie, it's not an easy process, to be blunt.
Is biodiversity net gain money likely to be?
You can, yeah. And there are some nice tools. Syria, the construction industry sort of research organization. There are things like this thing called BEST, which allows you can look at multiple benefits and looking at some of the environmental benefits that can be achieved.
Thanks.
So Miriam asked, what can groups do who don't have water ways in their parks? I think maybe that touches on what you were saying about SUDS. So I don't know if there's some useful links or something that you could send that I can distribute to groups. And she also asked, this is a really interesting question, does drought tolerant planting increase runoff or reduce absorption?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. There's been some quite useful work on allotments, which we looked at. But yeah, drought tolerant. I think we are finding that we had recent summers. It is quite challenging, and one of the analyses we've been doing is the number of days without rainfall. And it's surprising that you can have once a year you could have 20 days without rainfall. So there is a challenge in terms of ensuring that you have enough water. So if you have drought tolerant plants, certainly that's a good. Do they reduce runoff? I'm not sure. I guess it would depend on the plant and the soil and so forth. So yeah, not sure on that one.
Thank you. Anyway, so thank you very much everyone for your questions, and thank you, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's been very helpful. Thank you.
Digby, I will hand over to you, and I'm sorry we're running a little bit late.
No problem at all. Thanks very much, Laura, and thanks for the interesting talk, Adrian. I will just share my screen, everyone. So yeah, nope, gone to the end straight away. Spoilers. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me, and my colleague Ben is also joining us tonight. We're from Citizen Zoo. We're really looking forward to sharing some updates and insights from the Ealing Beaver Project, which is a partnership between ourselves, the Ealing Wildlife Group, the Friends of Horsenden Hill, and the Ealing Council. We're also supported by the Beaver Trust and the Mayor of London's office. So I'm going to try and make it nice and quick in the interest of time, and also to allow for questions, as Adrian did as well. Really, we're going to be talking about the background of the project, what we did in the work up to our release last October, how that went, current activities that are going on site, and also give some taste of what's to come from the project going forward. So Citizen Zoo, who are we? Well, we're a community interest company that does urban rewilding. So our mission is to rewild the future, and that encapsulates rewilding landscapes, which could involve species reintroductions, but also rewilding people. So that's connecting people and empowering them to take action. Well, that might mean multiple things, but in a nutshell, it's empowering people to go out there and do things and try and rewild and become more connected with nature. The Eurasian beavers, Latin name is Castor fiber. It's a native species that was once widespread in Europe. So you can see on this map here, there's quite a lot going on, but you can see the dark areas there are the former range of the beaver. And it was pretty extensive with the exception of Italy, Iceland, and Ireland. And it up until about the 12th century, that was its whole range. And then habitat loss and hunting, largely for the meat, which the meat and the pelts, which are very dense and waterproof, so very good for clothing and building. And interestingly, for castoreum, so you might not know that, but beavers have it's quite gruesome in a way, but beavers have an anal gland, the castor gland, that produces a substance called castoreum, which is vanilla scented. So it was used in flavor. I don't know how that was found out, but it was used to flavor drinks and food items, but also I think the most interesting aspect is that it contains because beavers eat a lot of willow, and willow, you might know the salicylic acid in willow is an active ingredient in aspirin. So historically, it's also been used as a painkiller, maybe even a hangover relief, castoreum from the castor gland. But for that reason, and the meat and pelts, they were hunted to extinction throughout Europe, and they declined to a point at the beginning of the 20th century where there's about 1,200 individuals across Europe. You can see the yellow areas on the map with the enclaves where the relic population survived. Thankfully, they did manage to, with lots of human intervention over the 20th century, they managed to recover. But the situation was even more acute in Britain because we're an island. So by 1600, they're extinct. So culturally, they're absent from quite a lot of our recent history. But in the 2000s, with a combination of legal and guerrilla beaver introductions across the British Isles, we've now got several thousand beavers in Britain, with hotspots you can see on the map if you look really closely. Around central Scotland, there's populations on the River Otter in Devon. There's a free roaming population as well in Kent and Oxfordshire. And generally, yeah, castor fibre is doing better than it was, and the population is expanding. So why are beavers interesting? Well, there's lots of reasons, but I think the one that brings us to begin with anyway is the flood mitigation potential benefits of beaver presence. So research has shown that you can reduce free flow by up to 60%, which is really significant if you're in an area that's prone to flooding. So they're a very powerful potential tool in that regard. Other environmental benefits include improved water quality. So the filtration, like the physical filtration that you get from beaver dams, where they're allowing trickles of water to flow through, will act like a filter. But also the slow moving water that forms those pools, the deep pools, will allow sedimentation to occur. So you're also getting pollutants and particulates filtered out into the bottom, into the substrate. And this also is how the carbon sequestration is a large way that the carbon sequestration is occurring too. So organic matter is getting locked in at the bottom of those pools. Not to mention the other carbon sequestration benefits that come from beaver landscapes. So like the complex environments are great for new growth and a complex habitat, which will also sequester lots of carbon for its activities. They also prevent drought, conversely. So really fascinatingly, and becoming more and more relevant with the climate heating. We've had anecdotal discussions with landowners who keep beavers. So people that farm are finding that having a beaver on their land is producing all these unintended benefits in terms of irrigation of crops or keeping water on site, preventing droughts during like summer of 2022, which was particularly intense. So there's a whole interesting dynamic there in terms of perceptions and changing perceptions once people are becoming more exposed to beaver habitats and beaver activities. But the best I'll say for last, which the picture kind of will illustrate it better than I can describe, but they are fantastic for biodiversity. They are ecosystem engineers. So there's not many species that are ecosystem engineers, as in will alter their environments profoundly at scale. Humans are one, beavers are another. But those amazing complex environments are fantastic for all sorts of taxons. So from invertebrates to birds to plants to mammals. You can see in the diorama there how many species can exploit those niches that beavers open up in the landscape. So hopefully that's a taste of what a beaver landscape looks like. But here's a video, if that wasn't enough. So my colleague Elliot went to southern Germany, and this is, I don't know if the sound's going to work because it tends to filter out, but you'll have to imagine that it sounds very alive. But this is right next to, I think it's Munich Airport, so very urban environment, but an amazing beaver created landscape. Hopefully that will work for people. and I'm not sure if the sound will work. You'll have to tell me in the comments if it does or doesn't, but you can hear birds, amphibians. It's very much alive, and the occasional plane going overhead as well. So as part of the establishment of the Ealing Beaver Project, Citizen Zoo also helped form the London Beaver Working Group in 2021. And the purpose of that group was to gather together stakeholders and authorities, landowners, people with a stake in potential beaver reintroductions within London. And really there were kind of 2 points that the working group was trying to address. And the first was that we know that with the expansion of free living beaver populations already in the south of England, so in Kent and Oxfordshire, and I think there's been an introduction in Essex too, we know that those populations may well eventually spread by their own accord into the waterways of London. So the first point really was to anticipate that and ask ourselves, how can we work with this in a positive way? The second was a more practical question, that was to identify potential sites that could be used before that event to have fenced enclosed beaver introductions, so that we could gauge public appetite and try to predate the potential natural colonization. So yeah, that was the aim, and I think there was 10 sites surveyed across London that were all potentially suitable for beaver introductions, or maybe even more than that. But we settled eventually on Paradise Fields in Ealing, which is the site that you can see here. It's a fantastic site. It's connected to Horsenden Hill, the Horsenden Hill complex in Ealing. It's just near Greenford here, to the southwest. It's a really urban setting, maybe also it's fantastic in terms of beaver habitat. You can see from this index here that although this site at the turn of the millennium was sports playing fields and was completely clear cut, within 20 years it's established as quite a complex mixed scrub and woodland area with plenty of water bodies. There's a better map on the next slide where you can see those water bodies that are essential for the beavers. But what's fantastic is all this yellow area here of well-established woodland, mixed woodland. And so by looking at that model and also gauging the community appetite, and crucially Greenford is very vulnerable to flooding, we came to the decision that it would be a great place to try out the first fully accessible urban beaver site in London. So that's what happened eventually. After lots of work, the site was enclosed with I think it's 1.2 miles, but I probably need to fact check that, of fencing, which there's 8 hectares enclosed there. You can see where the main lagoon, which is fed by the Costons Brook, coming down here, which is, I should say, not connected to the Union Canal, so it goes underneath. There's a culvert there, and there's also this field ditch here leading to the main lagoon, which is where the beavers were introduced, just where my cursor is there, if you can see that. They were released here, and there's also an upper pond in the corner that's ephemeral. So our money would be on if there's any expansion, because the standard size for a beaver enclosure, the minimum is 2 hectares. We've got 8. We've also got 5 beavers. So depending on what happens, we could get last year's, or it should be the year before's even, juvenile setting off on her own, potentially to set up her own territory. So if that happens, our money's on somewhere near the ephemeral upper pond becoming the next beaver habitat. But yeah, lots of work has gone into making the site ready for beavers, and that has been the infrastructure stuff has been the first part of that. Of course, like installing the beaver-proof fence, which has got specialist skirting. It's made by a company that also did Wild Ken Hill in Norfolk, so another major rewilding project with their own beaver enclosure. But beyond that, we've also run really great volunteer sessions with corporate and community groups to help, one, just build like a sense of excitement, but also to prepare the site for the beavers. So remove problem trees that might fall down, damage the fence, from anything from that to removing rubbish to clearing paths. We've worked with the Zoological Society of London. The bottom left, you can see Joe Pecorelli, who is an expert on freshwater invertebrates. So we have been doing baseline surveys which have been really interesting. And we're actually going to have that team back in a month's time to have a comparative survey, which I think would be really interesting to see if there's been any impact from the beavers on the freshwater invertebrate community. We've also worked with Carbon Rewild, which are a really interesting organization that use AI to analyze audio data and give a pretty comprehensive and accurate list of bird and mammal species on site. So that's been really important to informing our baselines, as well as some really fun days led by and really fun and impactful days run by the Biological Recording Company, who helped to run BioBlitzes with expert recorders, but also with members of the community as volunteer. So you get the opportunity to rely on some expert knowledge, but also to train up, and it's a really fun day. There'll be more of those going forward. So yeah, we've done lots of this, and this is continuing, but it was leading up to an amazing day, really, which was the release day itself, which was last October the 11th. We got really early on a Wednesday morning, I think we were there by about 6, and the beavers had a rougher time. I think they'd come down from Scotland in one go, so they were a bit grouchy, but they behaved really well. Everything went very smoothly. It was just a fantastic day with so many volunteers and loads of coverage, and it sort of blew up in a way. And I think that was, I think we were all just really pleasantly surprised by how positive the response was, and we all to our volunteers, really. So big shout out to them for their ongoing work. Like, the community buy-in has been incredible, and we have this team of about 150 people who will do fence checks daily, which is really important, running maintenance work, so checking that culverts are clear, identifying any hazards, everything that you need people on site to make sure that these projects are a success. And we've been blown away by how much support we've had and how much interest we've had and enthusiasm going forward. And that we've also got a camera trap team, and I know we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to try and speed through, but what we have got from our camera trap team is lots of amazing footage that I would really love to show you guys of our beavers in situ. Before that, some quick beaver signs. These started popping up like 2 days after instantly almost. And a good giveaway for beaver foraging sign is that you've got a 45, beyond the obvious teeth marks, but the real giveaway is a 45-degree angle. And so if you're in a beaver area and you want to know that it is definitely a beaver that's been chewing that stick, then that's a giveaway. And obviously the dams as well. And I made this, it's pretty much the same thing, but you can see the footprints are kind of eerily like a toddler's handprint if you're looking from a distance, and then you can reassure yourself by looking a bit closer, saying it's a beaver hind foot of a beaver. And their beaver poo is very unsurprising, I guess, is full of wood chip. So that's another giveaway. You can see we sawdust in there. Yes, to the camera footage, the best part. You can busy as beavers is not just a cliche, or it's a cliche for a good reason, because amazingly within a day, so we saw high water levels causing this dam to become leaky. Thanks to our amazing camera trap team, we get footage of the same spot of a beaver repairing that dam. And the next morning, I think this was Sean, our project lead, that took this. He can go back to the site and see the repairs made. So yeah, it's pretty incredible. Yeah, they're just machines, or better than machines. And to give you an update on where we're at now in February 24, the trees are getting bigger, the dams are getting much bigger, and there's more of them. There are several lodges, or at least 1 or 2 lodges that are established, but we can't say where they are for welfare reasons. But yeah, the changes are beyond what we could have expected. I think even immersing ourselves in it, it's still astonishing to know a site and to see those changes. Our camera and fence checking teams are doing excellent work using WhatsApp to communicate. We flag any issues. They help to communicate potential safe routes with each other, any tasks that need doing. it's working pretty well at the moment. Got one last good video to show, and then I think we'll move on to questions, because I know we're very close to the end of the hour. But this one, I don't know. We don't really know what the behaviour is, but we've asked Sean, who is a vet, and he's also talked to Roisin at the Beaver Trust, and we think it's probably just having a good time rather than anything to be worried about. But yeah, sort of very unusual movements, and but yeah, it's all these kind of behaviours are like a part of the joy of being part of this project. You know, you just find out new things every day about this incredible species that is thankfully back in the UK. And to be really quick going forward, we're going to keep going, and we want to expand and get more people on board, recruit as many volunteers as we can, and hold on to those dedicated volunteers we've already worked with. We're going to work on some more infrastructure enhancements. We've already got funding for a welfare unit so that our volunteers can make a cup of tea and store their bags and have a more enjoyable time on site. We're going to put interpretive signage throughout to help guide visitors to the site and inform them about beaver ecology. We're going to use fixed point photography too, which I'm really excited about. So you can mount a smartphone on a particular spot and take photos over the time, and that will help. You know, you can link that to social media. It's got lots of potential. We're also investigating future funding to expand the project to go beyond the initial framework, and we're also using drone surveys to assess the hydrology of the site, see the changes over time. We're going to have some incredible footage, I think, eventually showing the construction of the wetland and the crazy things that the beavers are doing, like already digging canals and into the ground, which is astonishing. But yeah, any questions? And I've put some QR codes up for our own volunteer opportunities on our website, but also the guided tours run by the Ealing Beaver Project at site, so you can also find out about those. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. The beaver videos look gorgeous. It's just amazing to see what they get up to. And yeah, I think just touching on, you know, you mentioned that you've had a really positive response. I think it shows you've really hit on something that's captured people's imagination. So well done, and it's good to hear that that you know you're looking to go further. Right, okay, Malcolm, you've got your hand up. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I've heard there's beavers in Enfield as well at present, but how many sites are they at in London? You might not be able to actually name them all, but how many sites?
I think.
And also,
oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
What's the likely expansion? I mean, you mentioned 10 sites you looked at initially. Are there other sites that are suitable, and are there any other plans for more sites?
For sure. Let me start with your first question. Well, we were the second. We got beaten just got beaten to the finish line by Enfield a couple of years previous, but there are only 2 sites within Greater London. So there's the Capel Manor Enfield site, which I think was a couple of years ago now, and then our own, which is Ealing. So there's only 2 at the moment, but there are definitely, I mean, there's those sites that we were looking at. There are definitely plenty of sites that could fit the bill in terms of habitat availability. Sort of about now at this stage finding the right partners to work with who have the means to go after funding to do that. But yeah, the potential is there now, or it has been the whole time. So yeah, we would absolutely. The London Beaver Working Group is still going, still looking to link with people who might be interested in future projects. So I don't have any. I can't give away any right now, but there are. Yeah, we've already spoken to some councils as well. But yeah.
Brilliant. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
We've had a question in the chat that was, how do you manage pedestrians and dogs on the site? Yeah.
It's a great question. Yeah, it's a big part of our engagement work. When we introduced the beavers in October, the Natural England, their license requirement originally was to completely shut down the site for a month and then have only daytime access for another month. but actually our first finding was that like restricted day-night access would actually be more likely to incite antisocial behaviour. So with the sign-off from Beaver Trust and Natural England, we opened after 1 month. We just did a complete open because people stopped hopping the fence because they could open the gate, and we realised it was safe to do so. But there's a lot of footfall, and that is part of one of its strengths as well as its weaknesses. So with the chain link, with the capital ring going through, we have lots of signage on site. We've always got people on site doing the fence checks, so they're part of their training as well, is to interact with members of the public. Sean and the rest of the Ealing Wildlife Route portion of the team who are based nearby there quite often, and we're keeping an eye on social media and all these different channels of communication so that we can kind of always promote the positive attitudes and stuff. In terms of dogs as well, we do insist that people use we try to communicate a message that leads are really important on site. It's not too much of if it's a through route that you're taking, it's not too much of a inconvenience to get to much larger open spaces. So that's in our favor as well. It's not restricting people who would only use the site in that sense. But yeah, it's important for the well-being of the beavers, but there's no direct threat from dogs. Beavers are pretty massive, so I think, unless we don't want to encourage anything, but they're not phased. We've seen footage of foxes approaching the beavers, and the beavers just sniff at the fox and shrug, and the fox runs away. And also New Year's Eve and Diwali and all the fireworks and ambulance sirens going off, and the beavers are completely unfazed. So they're tough. But yeah, I hope that answers your question in a sort of roundabout way.
Great, thank you. And Ian?
Hi.
Hi.
Very interesting. In your beginning of your talk, you said that the beavers reduce the risk of flood damage by 60%. How do they do that when they're actually building dams?
So it's up to 60%, and there's a range of academic papers that you can cite for that. So it won't always be that figure, but the way that they can restrict downflow is they can restrict longitudinal flow by just creating the dam, which will then it causes water to accumulate upstream and flow less quickly, I suppose, and then it retains more water on the land. But I think they also expand the wetlands will expand horizontally, if you get what I mean. They expand outwards in 2 directions, in 3 dimensions. So it's retaining a lot more water on site. It's creating localized flooding rather than the water running off very, very quickly.
So flooding is a control of flooding, in effect.
Yeah, and it's the leakiness it makes it more resilient to like high. As far as I know, my understanding of it is the leakiness makes it more resilient to like flash events.
I see.
Things are trickling more.
Thanks.
I hope that is a sort of vague and initial answer to it, but the best way to look into the research. If you look at the research, there's quite a lot of quite compelling and interesting experimental evidence.
I think I understand the principle. It
Yeah.
sort of slows the flow rate down and
Yeah.
contains it in a controlled way. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. Adrian?
Yeah, thanks. I remember the press around that release. So fascinating to have an update on that. I'm just wondering. I know Joe Pecorelli, and I've worked with him. Have you already started to be able to quantify some impacts that the beavers have had on the hydrology of that little site there yet, or is it sort of too early? Because I know it's it'd be quite interesting if nothing else, because we've had one of the wettest periods. And it'd be interesting to see whether there's been any sort of benefit already coming through from that work.
Well, it's not massively my area of expertise, the hydrology, but I know that the members of the team have already been. We've got some maybe Ben can correct me on it, but I know we've got a couple of people who are interested in deploying flow devices and also measuring dissolved solids. So yeah, we're in talks and hopefully going to
And is ZSL still engaged?
ZSL is still engaged, yeah, they're coming
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
So they're coming back as well.
I'll get in touch with Joe and see how it
Because that's for sure, yeah. I think the freshwater invertebrate stuff is a proxy, right, for
yeah.
Water quality, because some of those quite predictably, some of those species are very sensitive to pollution, so what you can see in the water will reveal by proxy how polluted it is, and hopefully we will be seeing we'll be seeing an uptick in species diversity. But I can definitely find out for you from other members who are of the project team who are a bit more clued in about the hydrology, if that's of interest, or indeed just go to Joe if you know him. But yeah, thanks for the question.
Thanks.
Sorry, just to jump in quickly there, we did do a freshwater invertebrate analysis back in July of last year with Joe and the ZSL team, and they're coming back next month for round 2. So we're hoping we'll have some idea of what impacts the beavers have made in just a matter of a few months. And in terms of kind of anecdotal evidence and around the hydrology, we've got a ranger on the team, the project team, who works for Ealing Council, who's been working at Paradise Fields and Horsenden Hill for, well, probably the best part of a decade now. And he said, whilst it's anecdotal evidence, he says he's never seen the site quite so wet as it is now, which obviously we did have a really wet kind of December, January time, so it kind of makes sense. But I do also think it can't be coincidental that you throw some beavers into a basin like that. They start putting some dams in, and obviously it's going to start to kind of lead to localized flooding, which hopefully we'll see in the future can store some water upstream and prevent some of the flooding that we've seen in recent years downstream in Greenford. But yeah, whilst at the moment it's just anecdotal evidence, but I think Digby mentioned on his last slide that one of the next steps is looking to do some hydrological surveys using drones. So we've got like a flight path mapped out that we've done drone surveys right at the start of the project, and then using kind of AI software, we'll be able to map the hydrology of the site as the project goes on to see how much water is being retained.
That's great. I was
within
just going to
Paradise.
suggest that, so it's brilliant that you're doing that.
Right, thank you. Margaret, you've got a question.
Sorry, yes, just quickly. If you have invasive plant species on site, something like floating pennywort or Himalayan balsam is another one, how do you manage that, or is there none?
Good question. I'm not sure about the sorry, do you have another? Were you going to extend the question, Margaret? Sorry.
I know there is a new control, a weevil, a beetle that can control pennywort. And if that was introduced, would that be a problem, or have you thought about that?
It's a good question. I know in another site that we run separately to the Ealing Beaver Project that we have a lot of problems with Himalayan balsam, and we do balsam bash, and it's an uphill battle. So the biological control is potentially really interesting, but I can't speak for at this stage. I don't know if Ben might know any different, but I'm not sure what the situation on Paradise Fields is. I don't think it's as pronounced as it is in other places. But if we were to, I'm not sure what control we'd be using beyond volunteer manpower, which if you are going up against an invasive species can be quite a challenge. But yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think we've discussed as a project biological control for that kind of thing yet, but it is interesting, so it's a good thing to bring up. I don't know if Ben, if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, just on that, as far as I'm aware, since I've been working on Paradise Fields, I've not seen Himalayan balsam out on site there, which is actually really positive. In terms of management, yeah, like DV said, we would first look to volunteer power to try and get on top of that, particularly if it was just like a localized issue within the site. But at the moment, yeah, it's not a problem. As far as biological control, again, not sure how we manage that at Paradise Fields, but not something to worry about at the moment. But I know on the Hogsmill catchment, where we've done our waterwell reintroduction project, South East Rivers Trust, who we work closely with, part of that project too, the run the catchment partnership. They trialed the kind of rust treatment for Himalayan balsam there, and we're waiting to see kind of what the results are going into the spring and summer. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that we'll have some positive outcomes. But at the moment, at Paradise Fields, we don't have a particular issue with any non-native species.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Right, we're just past 8 o'clock. Did anyone else have any burning questions? Or are we ready to wrap up? I think we're all set. Thank you so much to Digby and Adrian, and also Ben for your helpful words there as well. I think this is really interesting. It's two very different approaches on the topic, and it's just really great to hear about the work that you're both doing. So yeah, please do continue to keep us updated. Yeah, Adrian, please let us know when the hub is available, and yeah, Digby, please continue to let us know how the beavers are getting on. I think our members will be really interested to hear how that's all going. So thank you to the speakers, and thank you everyone for coming to the webinar. I hope you found it interesting. So yeah, thanks very much everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Laura, for organising
Thanks,
this.
everyone.
Fantastic
Yeah,
job.
thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks,
for
Thank you
Laura.
very
inviting us along
much.
as well.
That was great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. We'll be sharing the recording.
Yes, we will for certain. I'm just trying to capture all the chat because there were a few questions that I want to follow up on. So I'm just going to make sure.
Well, thank you, Laura, for organising.
Yes, Adrian, if it's okay, we did have a question in the chat that we didn't have time to get to because I was a bit conscious of time.
About the developments.
Yeah, about planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, would it be okay if I email that to you?
Yeah, sure. I might pass it on to my colleague, Dr. Anna Midge. She's been doing a huge amount of work on that. So yeah, but certainly pass it on, and we'll see what we can get an answer back, because it's an important one.
Yeah, great.
Anyway, thank you. I've really enjoyed that, and we'll keep you posted. So thank you,
Okay.
and
Thanks very much.
bye for now.
Okay, take care. Thanks, Adrian.
bye.
Bye.